Okay, so we are the Jinn and Tonic show. We talk about Islam. Why do we talk about Islam? Why is there a need to talk about Islam in the first place? Well, the first thing is that there are a lot of Muslims on this planet, okay? The number is anything between 1 and 2 billion. Nobody really knows. Muslims like the larger number. I don't know, maybe they feel more secure when there's more people. So we're talking, I think realistically, we're talking about 1.3, 1.5 billion, something like this. There are claims that it's growing. Nobody really knows why, but anyway, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that Muslims are following something called Islam, and Islam is making some pretty unique claims that it's the last and final revelation in any religion, of any god, of any kind. This is the one and only God. Well, most religions say that this is the one and only God, and every religion says that their God created the universe and everything around it. But then Islam says it's the only one, the last one, the final one. There's going to be no more prophets. Well, there have been other prophets, self-declared prophets, or people who have said that their gods have declared them prophets. But anyway, these are the claims that Islam makes. Then we have daily news of Muslims doing things which usually are not very nice. But then the media does tend to report on the not so nice things. So there you go. And this is why we look at these things, what is in the media, and we try and sort of put them into context and see how that fits in with Islam, with the texts and with history and things like that. So there's other reasons as well, because there's a lot of claims being made for Islam, which is based on the Quran, which doesn't really make sense. The claims don't make sense, the Quran doesn't make sense, the secondary texts don't make sense. So they require interpretation, and they require a context. It's not that this was a God and he provided a perfect book. There's nothing that you need to add or nothing that you need to do, and everything is self-explanatory. No. There's a lot of things that need to be said and a lot of things that need to be explained. So to put these things into context, there's people here who can provide the historical, the textual, whatever context. Now, why is it us talking about Islam? What is my goal? Well, my goal is not to deconvert any Muslim. If somebody needs a God, I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Zoroaster, Rastafarian, Sikh, or whatever. If someone needs a God, well, then why should I be the one to kill this? Do I have a right to do that? No, I don't think so. I think everybody's entitled to believe what they want to believe, as long as it does not affect others. And this, I think, is as tolerant as can be, because if people don't come to me and force me into doing something, then why should I care what they believe, what they think, what their faith is? I don't really care. It's only when people start, praying to stones and then throw those stones at me that I think I should react. So when Muslims, stormed the hotel I was staying in, I was not amused because I was only 6 meters away from those bullets. So this was not a pleasant situation. Now, why would those Muslims walk into a hotel with only civilians in it and go and try and kill everybody? Why would they go for the spa area, for the fitness area, for the pool area? Why would they do this? And this is why we are here to try and discuss these things. So, I am a human being, which means that I am not a racist. That makes me an a-racist. And I don't believe in horoscopes, so that makes me an a-horoscopopist. Whatever. I also don't believe dragons exist. That makes me an a-dragonist. So you can see that these words don't exist. So normally, if you are not something, like there's no word like an a-golfer, if something doesn't, it doesn't refer to you, there's no such word. I don't know why there is a word for somebody who does not believe in that gods exist. I don't know why there is this word atheist, which is the opposite of a theist, which comes from theos, with God. So there you go. So I am a normal human being who does not play golf. I don't think I'm a racist, and I'm not an astrologist, and I don't believe dragons exist. And I also happen to not believe that gods exist. If you, however, if you have evidence for a God, convincing, compelling evidence, then please bring it and I will change my mind immediately. If somebody brings the evidence that gods exist, why should I reject this? No, then I will believe this, of course. Anyway, so I have to accept the label atheist because I am a non-theist. So an atheist does not follow any dogma or agenda. The atheist does not believe what a theist believes, which is that there is evidence for the existence of a god or gods. And that is it. So the theist makes the claims, so the theist has to bring the evidence. I, the atheist, do not make any claims. I don't have a position, I don't have a statement, I don't have any beliefs. As an atheist, I have absolutely nothing other than the lacking belief that gods exist. So just because I am an atheist does not mean that I am a pro-scientist, does not mean that I am a materialist, does not mean anything other than I do not believe gods exist. And I don't know why I need to explain this so many times when it's quite easy to understand. But I think theists can't really handle the atheist who is patiently and passively waiting for evidence. They enjoy creating neo-atheists and funny things like that. I think it makes them better. You know, the more you categorize and the more you label people, the more comfortable they are with this, I think. All right, then. Do you believe that there's evidence for the existence of dragons? No, that makes you an a-dragonist, so that's it. And that is the end of this. So I'm an atheist. I don't believe that. I'm talking about Islam because, like I said, Islam is a lot of things, and I think Islam is not just another religion. Islam is not like, I don't know, like Sikhism or like what a Sikh believes, because in the Quran it states things like what to do in a justice system, like what the punishment is for certain crimes. It tells you what the inheritance is for if somebody dies, what they inherit, who inherits what by whom, to what, in what degree, and blah blah blah. So there's a lot of things which normally are not part of a religion, and that is why Islam has as a goal the installation of Sharia, and Sharia is based on the contents of the Quran and the Sunnah in most cases. And this is what we're trying to explain, how religion, sitting in the middle, can influence the other parts, the political, the worldview, the whole financial aspects, the commercial aspects, the justice aspects, and how this is being implemented in today's world. And that is what we're trying to do. So we're trying to do this by going back in time to look at, in history, how everything happened in the past. And we're trying to go to the text and see how that works. And what we're doing is we're looking at different kinds of, commentaries. I'm looking at historical commentaries, whether this be Tabari or Hisham or Ishaq or Jalalain's and other people like that. Now, what I'd like to have actually is a discussion with Muslims, because after all, we're talking about what Muslims believe. And I would love to have this discussion with and amongst the Muslims. But unfortunately, as soon as somebody knows something about Islam, Muslims are out. They don't come and discuss this anymore. It's more by chance that somebody happens to stumble in here and either turns out to be a total clown or turns out to be totally indoctrinated by stupid stuff. So I cannot really look back at any discussion that we've had. Maybe Edib Yüksel, he was more founded. I mean, it was ridiculous. I mean, the claims that he made, but he was better from an academic point of view than people like Mo Ansar or anyway, some other people. It doesn't really matter. Anyway, the way that we work on the show is that I deliver the definitions in the beginning, because I think it's very important to define what one talks about. And I think it's very important that people understand that I'm not trying to deconvert anybody. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Jew. I'm not anybody like that. I'm just somebody who does not believe in any kind of God. Then I will go through, introduce a quick video of the week, misconception of the week. Then we go through some news. Then we'll have a topic, and then Hadith of the week. And most of the times, if Hassan Cool is not here, I forget this, because this is a matter of looking it up, and you need to keep track of which one you've had and things like that. And because it's always, I don't know, I always look for excuses for not doing things. And then hopefully have a good discussion with the participants. Now, the topic I would love to discuss today, I don't know if people know so much about, and that is, I would like to discuss Hadith, all right? What the opinion is of people, the impact, the historical background, and things like that. All right, so let's get started. It's already 15 minutes after the hour. It's a Gin and Tonic show. It's a wonderful Sunday. It's the 21st of June, 2015. If anybody wants to join, go ahead and either click on the links that I provided via Twitter on the Gin and Tonic show, or on Facebook Gin and Tonic show, where you either go to the Hangout or you go to the Vaughan Live.tv Gin and Tonic show live link, where you can comment, or you can later watch the shows using archive.org. And the links, I think now I've explained sufficiently. Now, video of the week. I've selected a sad video because it says ISIS newbies hilariously regret career choice. Now, this makes a bit of fun. Actually, this is funny now, because now how do I put the link out there if somebody wants to watch it later? I'm not going to put it out now, because if I put it out now, everyone's going to wander off and take a look at the link, and then nobody's left here. So anyway, I don't know how I'm going to do that. So anyway, the title, you could type in the title, ISIS newbies hilariously regret career choice. And it's quite sad, because it shows how people have these ideas. They have these silly ideas of going and fighting for their God and doing something for their points, collecting bonus points so that they can go and go to heaven, and make sure that they go to heaven at a later stage, and maybe even get to put in a good word for their family members and things like that. And then they arrive in Iraq, and then they are set to sweep the floors and carry ammunition around and do trivial things, when all they wanted to do is actually fight for Allah, for their God. And if they don't know how to fight, they are sent to fight. So this is the hilarious part, because whatever somebody does is always the wrong thing, and the people who want to fight don't know how to fight and are not being sent to fight, and the people who are being sent to fight don't know how to fight and don't really want to fight. And this is why now a lot of people, no, don't put the link there. Yes, this is what I said. Don't put the link there, because now everybody's going to go off and look at the link. GPZ. And I saw this. I saw something move out of the corner of my eye, and it was the chat. All right, everybody's going to go off and watch the link, and I'm going to be left here alone, all on my own. Okay, that is the video of the week. The misconception of the week that I had today is Ramadan, because Ramadan has just started. Yes, happy solstice. It's unfortunately the longest day and the shortest night in the Northern Hemisphere. And from now on, the days are going to get shorter again. I can't believe that we are fast going towards winter again. This is what I hate about living in Europe. It gets cold here, and I hate cold. I think it's time to go back to the Southern Hemisphere and go back home to South Africa. Anyway, so it's Ramadan. What does Ramadan mean? Now, Ramadan, everybody knows it's the 8th month and blah, blah, blah. And we talked about this in the German show earlier on. Ramadan works that the people in Saudi Arabia today are sent out to the corners of the land to go and spot the moon. I mean, they have observatories who could tell them that 7:05 the moon is going to come up on this date or at this position, but they ignore this because this is modern technology, this is science, this is scientific, and they don't like this. So then what happens is they send people out to the borders of the country, and then as soon as somebody spots the moon, he quickly uses a phone and says, "Yep, I've spotted it." So the guy climbs up on the tower and screams down, "Yeah, Ramadan is here." So this is actually true, that it's still a perception, a visual perception of the moon appearing on the horizon. And this is what starts Ramadan. Now this is quite funny, because how does a Muslim in Norway know that it's Ramadan? He can't. And people, it's quite hilarious, because Muslims tell me, well, they use a phone app. Yeah, I know. Non-Muslims, like scientists, have developed phones with apps which show you the various starting times, the prayer times, and all that. But a couple of 100 years ago, people didn't have that. So how did 500 years ago, the Muslim in Norway, how did he know when it was Ramadan? Because maybe he saw the moon on a totally different day than the guy in Mecca. Or maybe didn't see it at all because it was cloudy or something. So this shows you that it doesn't really make sense. Now, Ramadan actually means that it's the month of fasting, which is supposed to be a spiritual month, bringing you closer to your God. I don't know how you can be closer to your God if God is everywhere, but never mind that. So it's supposed to bring you closer to your God, and you do that by fasting during the day, which means from sunrise to sunset. The more stricter version is that it must be from dark to dark. In other words, as soon as you see the first the first dawn approaching, you need to stop eating, and the other way around. But there's different interpretations, because as we learned earlier, Islam is based on interpretation. So Ramadan starts then, and then you're supposed to fast. But now, what if there is no sunset or sunrise? Like the guy in Norway again, he doesn't have sunrise or sunset for 3 months. Does he fast for 3 months until the sun goes down again? No, of course not. So this doesn't make sense. So we can see that Ramadan, like the whole Islam, is based on the idea that Earth is flat and consists only of Saudi Arabia, or is the Arabian Peninsula. Then we have all the other things. Why? What is Ramadan? What does a fasting mean? Most Muslims don't even know. They're not supposed to have sex. They're not even allowed to look at women. They're not allowed to drink anything, which is actually quite bad for you. And I'm sorry. I often have that. I don't have time for lunch. So I eat something like, when I get up, I quickly stuff something in my face, then rush off and go to work. And then at work, I find that I don't have time. Then I have conference calls, I have meetings, and people come in. Then I need to go somewhere, then da-da-da-da. And suddenly it's 8 o'clock. And I have not had time to eat. Now, is this so bad? No, it's not. So then the 24-hour McDonald's in I don't know, in Abu Dhabi opens when the sun is down. So during Ramadan, the 24-hour McDonald's is actually an 8-hour McDonald's, because it only opens at night. So there you go. And they don't serve bacon either. So Ramadan is actually a weird concept. What I've found in real life is that Muslims who are not so much Muslimic tend to be more Muslimic when it's Ramadan, because that's when they get reminded that they need to do all these things, and they go through the rituals, and that's when they go through Ramadan. So that's what we have at the moment. So if you've got a colleague who doesn't eat during the day, don't encourage him. He's suffering and trying to fight his inner jihad and fighting the hunger so that he can wait until the evening. If you are if you see a Muslima somewhere, no matter how nice she looks, you're probably not going to get her to bed until after dark. So don't even try, even if you're in the pool. Now, let's go to the news. In the news today, there's actually very little, so I'll have to fall back on what Ike did today, or yesterday even. Because according to the US State Department, we have Daesh, and Daesh apparently is to blame that deaths caused by terrorist attacks rose 81% in 2014. So they have more than 30,000 people who were killed by terrorists in 2014 and in last year. And that represents an 81% increase on the year before. Now that is atrocious, I think. That's terrible, and that is not something that you can just easily put away. And there we have to look, well, I think we've done this sufficiently. Where does Daesh come from? What are they based on? Where do they come from historically? Who used to fund them? Who funds them now? What does Saudi Arabian money do to them now? I think we've done that sufficiently. Another item which is similar is Boko Haram, because Boko Haram and Daesh are like sort of joining forces, because now there's more and more people saying, okay, we will get more visibility and we will get more done if we join Daesh. Yes, 90% of the world population, or even 95%, is against us, but like this we can show that we are a force to be reckoned with, and that we have millions of followers who all want to follow one God and things like that. The funny thing is, I never understand this. I mean, I can understand that somebody says, well, I'm too stupid to understand about the universe, I'm too stupid to understand evolution, I'm too stupid to understand atoms, so it's much easier to say, there's a God, and God did everything, and he takes care of stuff, and that's it. I can understand that. I can understand that people don't want to think about complicated things and just say, God did it. Now, what I don't understand is that they will say, well, my God is the best, the most loving, most caring, and the strongest, and he can do anything that he wants, and he knows everything, and blah, blah, blah. But I need to go and fight and kill my neighbor because he is not thinking the same thing and not believing the same thing that I am. This is what makes me like, I go, how is that possible? And this is what I can't understand, that there are more and more people actually joining this and saying that, yes, I will stone a person in the 21st century for having sex. I mean, come on, it's biology, and this is what they're trying to tell me, that they're going to kill somebody in the most brutal way possible, and this is what they are proud. I mean, there are people who tell me they are proud of being Muslim. They are not proud of the people killing others. But you can't differentiate. You can't say, well, Islam is good and brilliant and everything, but Daesh has nothing to do with Islam. I know a lot of people are trying to do that, but you can't, because it is the Islam that is the cause of this. This is the Islam. This is the Quran that the people are following. This is Muhammad, who did all these things. Muhammad beheaded, tortured, raped, plundered. He did all these things, and this is one-to-one what they are following. So I can't understand that people are proud of following Boko Haram and IS. The next thing that I'd like to mention is drugs. Now, a lot of Muslims say there's no alcohol allowed in Islam, which is bullshit. I mean, it's not in the Quran. It's just it's mentioned in the Hadith, but that's it. So these are humans. All right. So what I'd like to do then later, look at the Hadith and see what role they play, and why is it that if something is not in the Quran, like stoning somebody is not in the Quran, drinking alcohol or taking drugs is not in the Quran, and yet people say, yes, this is part of Islam. How is that possible? And why are there so many drugs in Saudi Arabia anyway, that they are killing people left, right, and center, hundreds of them, and official numbers say they've got 200,000 who are completely hooked on drugs, like drug addicts, in a country which does not have any drugs. So this is quite strange. Then another contentious issue is this thing with the hijab, with the burqa, with the chador, with the abaya, with how many other names this thing has, because it's not regulated in the Quran. Again, this comes from the hadith. It's cultural, because there are so many different versions of this. It depends on the regions, like a language. Depending on what language you speak, this is also the religion, and it could also be the version of the religion of that religion. So in other words, if you are a Baptist, or if you are I don't know, there's Jehovah's Witness, or something, there's like 30,000 different denominations only in Christians. And we have the same situation in Islam. So you have so many different versions of this, and then you have the different versions of how women are supposed to cover themselves. Now, I maintain that it's not women who should be taught how not to get raped, it should be men taught not to rape. That would be much easier. But then that seems to be too complicated. Okay, and then finally, this is how crazy Islam is, okay? If you have a lot of people fleeing from Syria, fleeing from Iraq, from the war, people fleeing from Algeria, fleeing from Libya, everywhere where you get these Daesh and violent Muslims, people are fleeing, normal people are fleeing, because normal Muslims are normal Muslims. Okay, they just want their lives, they live peaceful lives, look after their family, and they just live a normal life. They call themselves Muslim because they pray to a god or whatever, but they're just normal people. And yet, when they are involved in a war, they flee, and the best place for them to flee to is not Saudi Arabia, but Europe for some odd reason. But now what happens is they arrive in Europe, and then they are distributed throughout the European Union. Now, some arrived in Germany, and they went and put them into a camp where they need to wait for a while until it's decided where they're going to go, what they're going to do with them, what their level of education is, and things like that. And now, because there are different groups within Islam, now the refugees in this camp started fighting amongst each other because they have different versions of Islam. And that's how crazy it is that the people who are all fleeing from wars and from violence are now fighting one another for the various interpretations of Islam. And for me, that is really, really crazy. Okay, so this was the news from my side. Let us now go and discuss Islam. I actually wanted to discuss Islamic banks, but we can do that next week. I would love to. Okay, we can do both. If somebody wants to say something about Hadiths or something, then I think this is fascinating. This is a highly interesting topic. Let's see what we can come up with. Let me start off on the Hadith. What are Hadith? All right. That we have the primary source for anything that a Muslim will do, and that is the Quran. So if the Quran says you're not allowed to eat pork, then a Muslim will say, well, I'm not allowed to eat pork. That is a clear-cut instruction, and it is not being I don't know, there's no contradiction there. So this is a very straightforward command which is found in the Quran. Whereas if it says, well, you're not allowed to do anything that will cover your brain, that already requires some sort of interpretation. And that interpretation, the secondary text, is then found in the Hadith. So people will then, the first thing that they will do is they go to the Quran, and if the Quran is unclear or doesn't say anything about this, they will go to the Hadith. And then in the Hadith, they will look in the authentic ones, and then they will go and find obscure ones and other things. So then they will go into the commentaries, they will go into the biography of Muhammad, and so on and so forth. So this is the way that it goes. So there's a hierarchy in the text. And the Hadiths are the secondary text, the second tier in the hierarchy level of the text in Islam. Now within the Hadiths you have different levels as well, because some are considered to be authentic, because a Hadith always consists of two different things. One is the contents itself, and two is the chain of narration. In other words, a Hadith is supposed to be something that Muhammad said or did or thought out loud or whatever, and then somebody saw this or heard this or whatever, passed it on to somebody else, who passed it on to somebody else, who passed it on to somebody else, who passed it on to somebody else, and this was then recorded to mostly 300 years later. So this is like today, somebody collecting everything that Napoleon did. And that is what a hadith is. And that is how reliable hadiths are. In other words, they're fairy tales. They're totally useless. Plus, we know for a fact that hadiths were fabricated. We know that hadiths contradict each other. We know that hadiths contradict the Quran. We know that a lot of hadiths, even if they are deemed authentic, are then suddenly declared inauthentic again because they contradict what the person actually wants. So what we have is the highest level of hadiths are authentic. The highest one of the 6 authentic hadiths are 2 collections, one by Bukhari, one by Muslim. And these 2 collections used to be something like hundreds of thousands of sentences. And of course, these were unmanageable. Nobody knew what was in them anymore. So somebody decided to cull them and to throw out all the unauthentic ones. Now, if they were authentic in the beginning, how and what criteria was applied to determine that they were authentic or not, when previously they were also deemed authentic? So this is quite strange that the classification of the hadith seems to be completely arbitrary. And if you find one, because like for example, like I said, the highest level is Bukhari, and Bukhari has something where Muhammad says to his people, listen, enjoy your orgasm when you are raping captive women. Don't worry about their price on the slave market. Allah is going to decide which one of them will get pregnant. So just enjoy your orgasm and don't pull out prematurely, this coitus interruptus. And this is what you find in the most authentic hadith. And this is about what Muhammad told his people. But now this is embarrassing for Muslims, so they don't like it. So what they suddenly say is they declare this one, well, yeah, all the other hadiths are authentic, but this particular one is dubious because obviously nobody would want that. But then you find the next one, which says something, something similar to what Muhammad did, and say, well, all the others are authentic, but this particular one then is not authentic, no, not as authentic, because there must be something wrong, because this cannot be. So I don't really know how people get the knowledge about what it is that they are doing. Like the Quran does not specify anywhere, you Muslim, I created you to worship me, and I command you, if you want to go to heaven, you need to pray to me, and you need to pray to me 5 times. The Quran does not specify that. It does not tell Muslims to pray. So why do Muslims pray? Because they used to do that. They've always prayed because they copied this from the existing rituals from the people. And if you look at the region, if you look at the time period, if you look at over 1,000 years ago, Zoroastrians and the Yazidis, they were praying 5 times a year. So that they just copied this. So they just continued, the same as the names of all the gods, they were already known. So there's nothing new in the Quran. So the Quran just sort of skips by the whole praying issue and says praying is something good, and Muhammad, it's good if you pray, but it doesn't tell the Muslims to pray. So Muslims pray because the Hadiths say, or Muhammad said, you need to pray, and you need to pray 5 times, because it doesn't say so in the Quran. So the central aspect of a Muslim's life, this number one pillar of Islam, is not mentioned in the Quran, but it's only mentioned in the Hadith. So if you look at the level of a Hadith and the importance of a Hadith, it is vital. And that is why you have all these sayings. In Shia Islam, they are called differently. They have different names and different authors, but they have very similar texts, because obviously the Quran doesn't say so. So there you have this. Then,
Can I ask a question?
if you look at different rituals, if you go and, for example, if you look at some, let's take something content. I mean, hijabs. The hijab is not mentioned anywhere in the Quran in connection with clothing. So the word hijab as such does not appear other than as a normal as a separation between parts and partitions of a room, and that's it. So what about more contentious issues like what I said, drugs, alcohol? People say that they know that
What do Muslims
alcohol
do?
is prohibited in Islam. Where do they get that from? Is that in the Quran? Or music is prohibited in Islam. Is that in the Quran? None of this is in the Quran. And you can look for the word alcohol. You will not find the word alcohol. You will not find a definition of alcohol because, I mean, hydrogen, oxygen molecules latching onto a saturated carbon atom in a specific order and amount will amount to alcohol. But that is not mentioned in the Quran. So nobody knows what alcohol actually is just reading the Quran. But then if you go to the Hadith, then you have the explanation that they are talking about fermented fruit because they left dates or I don't know what they left in whatever transportation device they used. And if this was left in the sun for a couple of days, it started fermenting. And then if they drank it, they became drunk. And then they learned blah, blah, blah. And then, I mean, wine has been around, I don't know for how many millennia now. So they learned this. And then suddenly somebody apparently prayed and was drunk and was not able to lead the prayer. And then they said, well, you're not allowed to be intoxicated when you're leading prayer. So I don't know if they did a breathalyzer test before they let the imam pray in front or whatever. But that was the beginning of the whole thing. That's why you get the different stages in the Quran. And Muslims say, yeah, but this was a gradual thing. And, well, why wasn't pork gradual? Why wasn't any of the other things gradual? Why are you not allowed to make love to somebody unless you marry them first, unless you pay the money first? So none of this was gradual. So why this thing with alcohol, even if, and particularly if alcohol is not even mentioned? So these are the things that you find in the Hadith. And then suddenly you find that you're not even allowed to handle anything with alcohol. Then it gets like really paranoid, and that's when the funny things start happening. So, is there anybody else? Plato, Pretty Apostate says that he's got problems with the sound card. I read they needed a witness, which is why one companion went mental because he couldn't find a witness for his. Yes. Okay. Let me go into that.
Can I
now.
ask a question?
Is there anybody else that wants to contribute something?
Yeah, me.
Oh, hello, Jeremy. No, who's it? Plato.
Yeah, it's me.
Okay, Plato, go for it.
Right. What do Muslims do when hadiths contradict each other? Saying Sahih Bukhari or Sahih Muslim, or if they contradict each other within the same canon?
It's pick and choose. It's always like that. I used to. Well, I always forget that I do not have a channel anymore because it was easy to refer to the video and say, well, in this video, I go and analyze this and I show what they are doing, because I had a video out there where I took hadiths, like very simple ones, where it says Muhammad washed himself 3 times, and then the next one says Muhammad washed himself twice, and then it says Muhammad washed himself 5 times, and then everybody copied that. But now, which is it? Are you going to wash yourself twice? You know, how many times do you wash yourself? And then they go and they choose. They just pick and they say, well, I think twice should be okay, because he said twice, so that gives a preference over the 3 times which he only mentioned once. So if there is a contradiction somewhere, they just pick one. They just say, and this is the way that it works. Okay, in everyday life, if somebody has a question, the guy says, I don't know, go to your imam. So he goes to the imam, asks the question, the imam says, oops, sorry, I do not know. So he goes to his group of imams, They discuss this, and then they say, we don't know, we will go to the higher group. And then you have one guy, and it's always a guy, an old guy, who then decides what the ruling is. This is why you have the major madhabs, which are the groups which are historically based on one guy, like a Mr. Hanbali, or Mr. Shafi, Mr. Ansar, who then decided this is the ruling. Like if Muslims pray, you have contradictions. Do you put you always have to put your right hand over your left hand, because the right hand is the good hand, that's what you touch the Quran with, the left one you wipe your ass with. So it's always the right hand over the left hand. But now, do you put the two together above your belly button, on the belly button, or below your belly button? Or do you take the Zakir Naik position, which is like a praying mantis, where the wrist almost touches his chin? So these are then individual rulings. And these then go back to the imams, and then the imam will tell the guy, listen, I found out for you, and what your God wants is to stand like this and la la. Or do you keep your feet vertical when you're on your knees? Or do you make like an A, or do you make a V, or do you cross them, or do you put them to one side? This is all very particular and solved by one person who knows exactly what God wants. And if you don't do that, your God's going to be so angry with you, it's amazing. But if you ask a Muslim, what happens if you do not pray 5 times a day, if you only pray like twice? Well, then you're sinning. I said, okay, but what's the consequence of that? Are you going to be treated like an apostate? Are you going to be treated like a kuffar? Are you going to be treated like a polytheist? Are you going to go to hell if you only pray twice? No, but it's a sin. I said, well, what happens if you don't pray at all? Oh, no, that's a terrible sin. Yeah, but what is the consequence? And they will not be able to tell you, because there are no consequences. Because for them, it's impossible that if you are a total polytheist or a total atheist, you get the same treatment, the same punishment as somebody who is a Muslim, who believes everything and who's a good Muslim. He just simply doesn't fast or doesn't pray or doesn't whatever. So this is quite difficult to ascertain. Okay, so this was the contradiction in the Hadith, the treatment of those. What is more difficult is when they contradict the Quran, because then you need the ruling of several, and then it needs to go to a higher level, and then it actually gets quite difficult. Because in the Quran, I don't know if everybody knows this, if you have a word, you need to go and find out what that word means. You do that, this is what they call exegesis, where you go and you look at this word, how it is used in other sections of the Quran. If that doesn't help, then you go how it is being explained in the Hadith, and if that doesn't help, then you go into the biography, and if that doesn't help, you go into the ulama, the scholars, and then you have this ijma, this consensual interpretation of what they think their God wants. So it's quite hilarious, actually, if you look at it. Any other question? I really did. The witness. If we look at the Hadith, all right, the Quran itself was actually quite a funny thing. It was supposed to have been revealed over 23 years in a specified order, which nobody really knows, but every Muslim knows exactly which sentence was sent down. It's always down. I mean, because God is always up and we are down, because Earth is flat. And invisible pillars are supporting the very solid canopy, above which is the water, and above which, on the 7th floor, the penthouse, resides God. So when God sends down via the angel Gabriel, who whizzes down to earth and then finds Muhammad in a cave, gives him a sentence and then buzzes off again. And then Muhammad gives this to some other people, they pass this on to some scribes, the scribes then write this down, then it gets modified and blah, blah, and so on and so forth. So in this process, they apparently missed a couple of sentences because the people who remembered them were killed in all the various battles, because Islam is, it's very peaceful and they don't fight, but then they were attacked. I don't know how that works, but anyway, they make it look as though they were attacked and they were in these huge battles, because they always had to defend themselves. and then they lost the people. And now all of a sudden, they ran out of people who remembered the Quran. Now Muhammad was still there, and he was supposed to remember everything, but apparently he didn't, so they needed more people to remember it. And then apparently in chapter 9, in sentence, and I forgot the number now. There was a number, which I forget, and it doesn't come back, okay. There was a specific sentence which nobody remembered. And they said, there was a sentence, but I don't remember it, and I remember, it was Abu blah blah blah. He remembered the sentence. And then there was only one person that they could find that actually remembered this one sentence. So this is how the Hadiths explain the revelation of the Quran, where it becomes very human, where the mistakes become human, where the scribes who could hardly speak or write Arabic were writing things down. That's why you have these 29 single letter things like ALM and HM and things like that. These are scribes who just added their own initials or something like this, and then they became part of the Quran because people didn't understand it. And that's how the whole thing happened. And this is what the Hadiths explain. And the Hadiths explain how, for example, one guy says, and this was revealed by Allah, the best of the creators. And then the guy, and Muhammad says, wow, best of the creators, that's a brilliant sentence, I will add this to the Quran. It's showing quite clearly that the Quran was created by humans. And then it says, well, no, in the Hadith it mentions the stoning verses, the stoning sentences in the Quran. But if you look in the Quran, they're not there, they're missing. Then the Hadiths mention the chapter about the hijab, about the covering of women, which is not there, unfortunately. So whether they actually existed or not, nobody knows. It's just that the people want to believe this. And then you have different hadiths by different people, but once you start analyzing hadiths, you find that there is a concentration. Now, there was a Dutch guy who looked at the hadiths and he analyzed them, and he found out that something like 60% of the hadiths it was 80% of the hadith are narrated by 4 people. Or something like this. Was it 4 or 3? I can't remember. Something like this. It was a very low number. So what you have is an obvious bottleneck, because only very few of the people actually came up. So if you read the hadiths, you will find the same names coming up again and again, who were said that they were part of Muhammad's entourage, his Sahaba, and they picked up everything that he did and said, and then they narrated it and told somebody else, and they passed it on, and then this branches out. But if you take the hadiths and you go and you follow them backwards, so you have like 10,000 hadiths, and then you have maybe 8,000 people in the first instance, and then it goes down to 6,000, 2,000, until in the end you only have 3 or 4 people who are actually the ones they all go back to. So it's quite funny if you analyze the hadith scientifically, that you get a result which is quite astonishing, which shows that they are mere fairy tales made up by people. It's the same as in Jesus and the Christians. You have a situation in the Garden of, and I forgot the name, where Jesus says something. Why doesn't God pass this cup, let this cup pass by me, or something like that? And then he looks around and everybody's sleeping. Now, how can this be in the Bible if everybody was sleeping and Jesus didn't write anything? How did the people who wrote the Bible write down this one sentence, God, let this cup pass me by, or something like that? How can they write this down if everybody was sleeping? Who was there to record this? There was nobody there, so they just made this up. And this is something that you find in Islam as well, that you find in the Hadiths again and again and again, that there's nobody there, that Jesus made this up, because it's impossible that this has happened. Then you have ridiculous things in the Hadiths, like dipping your fly in your drink so that the poison on the one wing can contaminate your drink, but the antidote on the other wing of the fly will cancel this again, because God has a punishment for everything and has a poison and so on for everything, but has an antidote for everything at the same time. So, and people believe this. Okay, people actually believe this, and they don't see it as a parable, as something which, when God does something, is being seen as something positive at the same time or something. And people don't see this; they see this as literal. The same thing as the ants talking. I mean, in the Quran it mentions something like this, and then people look for ants talking. I mean, how can they believe this? It's the same thing as with the swiping a corpse with a piece of steak. It does not make a corpse get up. But Muslims refuse to see reality. They will do anything and say, well, yeah, but it's a miracle, and it was at the time of Moses, and maybe then it was possible that you could hit a corpse with a piece of steak and it will get up. No, it doesn't. And this is what people in Islam have to believe. And there's a lot of things which are then being elaborated in the Hadiths. But if we look at the way that they are organized and structured, and everything that we learn about them makes it very clear that this is not possible, this is not true. Okay, any questions on Hadith? Have I left something out? Is there something that I need to mention on the Hadiths? Nothing in the chat. Allah loves Muslims. It's what the fact is. It's more than the Quran, and there's only one non-violent Medina verse. What is MA6 for the MA? I don't know what MA means. More than the Quran. I think the Quran was made up. Well, we've covered the origin of the Quran many times. In a nutshell, it was just. I mean, if you look at the things where you see that people are required to fight for their God, required to fight for the Caliph, and are required to not enjoy life, then it's quite obvious that they want fighters. They don't want drunkards. They don't want womanizers. They want fighters. So what they do is they tell the people, no, you're not allowed to drink, you're not allowed to womanize, you need to fight. And that's the result. So this is what the Quran does. And this is what the Quran was made up as. And that's why the second chapter, for example, I think everybody agrees by now that this was a separate book and it was just incorporated and then things were added. Steak, I thought it was a yellow cow's leg. It doesn't say, it just says a piece of the haifa, the yellow haifa, yeah. So maybe I'm disrespectful calling it a piece of steak. Okay, are there any questions on Hadith? Did I leave something out? Is there anything that interests anyone? And because this was like a very quick summary on Hadiths, and I was actually hoping that people would want to have a discussion: who, what, where, when, with what, and so on. But it seems everybody's very clear on Hadith. Or ahadith, I should say, correctly, in Arabic. Okay, then the second topic I had, maybe that's more interesting for people. There's more and more, let's call them Islamic banks, being opened in Europe. Does anybody know what an Islamic bank is?
It's Islamic bank accounts I've heard of where it's just like a regular bank account, but you don't get any interest.
Correct, because an Islamic bank works off the principles of Islam. Now, the principles of Islam, remember at the beginning I said it's actually more of a nation and more of a financial ministry than a religion. One of the things that Islam dictates, that the Quran dictates, is that you don't get any interest on your money. That money cannot gain money, and that money is only the representative of a product, of an object. So you cannot have money as such without having something that it represents. And this is the principle of Islamic banking, that you cannot get interest. In other words, you cannot speculate on the exchange rate. This is not allowed in Islam, because you don't have a material value, you don't have a product that the money represents, and just money as itself cannot do that. So this is something that I actually think is a good idea, that you don't have this the US version, which is only growth all the time, and then you speculate, and then when the crop of sugar is down, then the prices need to go up, so you artificially reduce it to bring the prices up because you just bought some shares of sugar and things like that. This I despise. And there I think the Islamic banking system is better than the United States one. The other things, everything else around Islamic banking is just sheer hypocrisy. Because what they do is they say, well, you can open a bank account, and if you do X, it's going to cost you Y. Now, what is the difference? And what I had on my bank account is, if I transferred an amount above whatever, then I had to pay this much. And if it was this much, then I had to pay this much in fees. So what they did is they specified a fee for an amount, which is the same identical thing what you're doing with percentages. And if you take the money and you lend it to them, they will give you a certain amount back. So in other words, what the bank will do, for example, is they will buy a property, and then they will invite you to buy a share of that property. And then what you will do is, when this property is then sold, then there is a real object and a real product involved. Then you get the money back plus your share of whatever profit it made, which in my eyes is no different, just a relabeling of terms. And the funny thing is that Muslims will refuse to believe that. Muslims refuse to see that the fees generated by a bank, or levied by a bank in Islamic banking, is identical to the interest rates that you are paying or getting or whatever. It's just a different name for the same thing. So this is quite strange. But this is Islamic banking. Now, what I was hoping is that people will have their own ideas regarding Islamic banking. Does anybody know any bank? Has anybody seen a bank in their vicinity which is based on Islam? Nobody. Please note that there is a delay on the warn and we can't reply right away. Yeah, but the delay is like a couple of milliseconds, isn't it? Christians used to believe the same thing is biblical. Yeah, but this is goes back to the Jews. I mean, Islam copies most of the things from the Jews. By the sweat of one's brow, interest has no sweat involved. Christianity changed the vision of the Venice merchants. Is that when they became capitalists? Okay, any questions, any comments, anything on Islamic banking? This is a slow show today. I think the old system where everybody was forced to come in there was easier, because then they said something. Today it seems Okay, is there anything else that people want to talk about regarding Islam? How do you actually spell and pronounce the Quran? No, this is not a stupid question at all. That's a very good question, actually. Which is asked a lot. Quran in Arabic just merely means recitation. And the way that it is spelled in Arabic obviously is different to the transliteration, and is very different to the way that you spell it in English. So the way that it sounds is the Qur'an, which I always made fun of Clinshaw when he pronounced it like that. And the way that it's the transliteration in Arabic with this guttural sound, the Qur'an, is that you have the Q-U-R, and then you have an apostrophe, and then the long A, and then an N, because it's Qur'an. And this an is not an in, or whatever, it's an an. So they make an A with a line on top of it. So it's very difficult to transliterate. The same as you don't say Moskva, and the same as you don't say Khruntep or one of these things for cities, you say Moscow and you say Bangkok. So then the Quran becomes Quran. That is the way if you pronounce it. If you take the Quran with a QU, then in English it would be Qu'ran. So if you want to say Qu'ran, then you spell it with a Quram. And I don't know for what reason, Muslims seem to think that the Qu'ran should be the right way of spelling it. I don't know where they get this from. Now, a lot of words are, I don't know if you've noticed that if a Muslim apologist says something, Allah says in the Quran, and then he will first say an entire sentence in Arabic, and then repeat this in English or German or French or whatever language you're listening to, because they insist that the original is only available in Arabic, because their God only spoke Arabic. And this is why they always give you this in Arabic, even if they know 100% nobody speaks Arabic, they will still give it to you in Arabic, and then only give you the approximate meaning of that Arabic. And that is why even today there is no accepted or authorized, or whatever you want to call it, translation of the Quran. That's why they want to keep all these Arabic terms, and an apologist will always use Arabic words for all sorts of things and then repeat them in English, as though it makes it more mysterious or more authentic or whatever if they use ancient Arabic from 1,000 years ago.
I quite like the justification for that.
Is the old version, and Quran is the English version with K-O-R. And in French, for example, it's C-O-R-A-N or whatever.
So I quite like the justification for why it always needs to be accompanied by the original Arabic, and it's not really because it's some godly language. It's because there's so much room for interpretation. There's so much ambiguity that there is often no one translation. There's multiple translations, so you can sort of bend over backwards to interpret it however you want.
So what you are saying is that it's down to the lack of an authorized or
it's down to the inherent nature of the fact that, as I understood it anyway, the Arabic is quite an ambiguous language, or written Arabic. They don't have the vowels written down, so there's all sorts of stuff where you can interpret words differently.
Right. And that's why that's why if an Arab explains something, he will always explain it from different points of view. Because in Arabic...
That's what allows for all the interpretation.
Exactly. And if he wants to make a point, then he will explain it using different ways, saying apparently the same thing, but he's so used to doing that because in Arabic you don't have this precision that you have in the English language. Like, most people don't know that the entire Quran uses a vocabulary of something like 2,000 words. So there's not a lot there. That is why the translation will differ depending on what a person understands what it says there. This is why there's different stories in the Quran where if you take the word and you use it slightly different, it gives it a slightly different meaning. And then if you build on that, it gets worse and worse. We had this case where, I think this was still when Hassan was around. He gave us an example of, then they were victorious, is a specific word in Arabic. If you then take this as an opposite, they were defeated, the only difference between those two words is one small little character on top of another character. In other words, defeated and victorious is identical. So in the old Quran, where you didn't have these so-called diacritical marks, then you don't know what it means. You need to look at it from the context, and you need to look at it from the other directions of the possibilities that are there. Otherwise, you will never know whether they were defeated or whether they were victorious. It's very complicated to get a meaning in the Quran if you don't know what it says. This is why it's so difficult. And that is why I always maintain the first step that Muslims need to do, they need to come out with one version of the Quran and say, okay, this is now the Quran. This is what it says. Because always saying, yeah, it says there that you can beat your wives, but actually it means you can't beat your wives, that doesn't work. There needs to be one version that everybody can agree on, and that's it. Okay, does that explain that? I think it was dial-up internet where yeah, they still have this or something. We are behind Asia. This is true. Some starting called Al-Quran now. Well, the Al is just the. So you get different. You get the Quran, and some call it the noble Quran, the glorious Quran, giving it very human attributes, which is stupid. But that's the way. Topic concerning Ramadan. What do you think about the different types of praying during Ramadan all over the world? For example, in Moscow, they block the biggest streets to pray, when here in Muslim majority country, I've never seen. Oh, okay. I actually have a video. I used to have a video where I show people praying in the streets because the mosques during Friday prayer are too small, and you can't get all the people in there. So they pray in the street. And you get this all over the world. It doesn't matter where you go, whether you go to Berlin, London, or Paris. In Paris, they make it a point. Okay, people come from a different arrondissements, the different sections of the city, to make a point of blocking the street to show that they are, there's a lot of Muslims and they don't have enough places to pray. So this is quite funny. But that's the way, yeah. I'm surprised Putin lets them get away with that. Well, Putin is a multicultural country. It's very difficult. How are you going to stop this? Are you gonna carry them off the street? What are you going to do? There's going to be a time when somebody, like in Graz now, where somebody will just take his car and just run over them, because you will maintain this is a road and this is not a prayer station. And in Paris, it's actually declared illegal. They have a law banning the blocking of roads for the purpose of praying. But Muslims don't care. They want to make a point. They want to be in your face. They want to be provocative, and that is why they will continue to pray in the streets. Yeah. Well, they could put it in Chechnya, ruthless China. Yeah, I still haven't heard what what Erdogan is doing in Turkey, or what Sisi is doing in Egypt. How this is going to develop. I mean, that's going to be, because Egypt and Turkey, for me, are the most important states in the Muslim bloc, where it's undecided in which way they're going. I mean, what happens in Indonesia, Malaysia, and so on is pretty clear. There's not much change there, or that can be expected. But then what happens in Egypt and what happens in Turkey is going to be interesting, because they are on the verge of making changes. So that's going to be something worthwhile watching. Okay, is that it? So if that's it, then I will say thank you very much for everybody. I don't have a hadith for the day, for the week. I was relying so much on Allah. So, and he's got microphone problems or internet problems, and I have not found my file yet, and opening it now and coming. No, I'm just going to leave it. We'll have to bring the hadith of the week next week. Today was quite hectic for me, actually, because it's different if somebody's looking over your shoulder, doing things and guiding you, and no, you don't click there, you click there, and setting everything up. So I hope next week I will remember what to do, and that it's not really going to be quite so hectic. And maybe I can one day even make it an integrated solution or whatever. All right, guys, then thank you very much. Thank you for those who joined. Thank you for those who asked the questions. And then we will see everybody next week on the Jinn and Tonic show on Sunday, 1800 UTC. See you then.